Well, it's a collection that's in a number of sections, some of which are miscellaneous and some of which are sequences. Even the miscellaneous ones have poems threading through them, which are connected. There are lots of poems about music in the book. There are lots of poems about children, and lots of poems which name check philosophers, particularly those who are involved with the idea of is it yes or is it no, the yin and yang thing, the dichotomy principles of various philosophies. I'm not a philosopher, though. I'm a poet, so I approach it in a different way. I'll tell you why this book is called So Glad I'm Me. I was having a drink with a friend called Claire one night, and Claire had had perhaps slightly too much Lady Petrol, as it's called, white wine, and she was nodding off across from me at a table at a bar, and there was some very noisy hens getting into taxis outside, and Claire woke up just for a few seconds, lifted her head up and said, "So glad I'm me," and then back to sleep again. And I just thought, that's a good name for a poem. And I went home and wrote the poem right away. And it's a poem about the idea of the tragic heroine, the way we have a fascination with that stock character. And it eventually became the collection title. I don't really have a set way of composition. Sometimes it does start with a little phrase which just comes to mind. There's a poem in this book, for example, called Union Mild Etch. It's a very strange little phrase, and it's actually a disease of almond trees. And I just loved the way that sounded, Union Mild Etch. And so the poem came from that. Other poems come from bigger ideas. Other poems come from anecdotes. There's a whole section of poems in this book about someone who is referred to throughout the poems as Amber Eyes, but is actually a real person, a friend of mine, who is good fun but slightly dangerous to hang about with. And it's about some of the time I spent with her and some of the things we did together and places we went together. And sometimes poems write themselves because you just happen to know someone. It might even be yourself who feeds into the poem with their personal content. And sometimes poems follow on from the last poem you wrote, or a poem you wrote a few months ago or a couple of years ago. There are some poems in this book which are from my ongoing sequence of poems which are based around the animal zodiac, and I write one every year halfway through the Chinese year. And I think I'm 8 or 9 in now, and I think numbers 4, 5, and 6 are in So Glad I'm Me. So that's another way that poems sometimes build up into a collection. I'm always interested to see which poems people pick up on. There are always a handful of poems that you know are among the stronger ones. And you know people are going to like those ones, or hopefully admire those ones. But there are always ones that surprise you as well. There's a poem in this book called Elba, which is and isn't about Napoleon's exile, which though I like the poem, I didn't think it was one of the hits from the album, if you like. But it's definitely been one of the poems that people have picked up on so far and said they really liked that one. Maybe it's just because it's got a really short title, and so they ended up starting with that one. It's quite scary to be nominated for these prestigious awards. I was nominated once before for the T.S. Eliot Prize, but I was relatively young back then, in the early 2000s. And I was up against a Nobel Prize winner, and I kind of was pretty sure I wasn't going to get the prize, and that I was correct. This time round, it's quite an open field. Any of the 10 poets might take the prize, and of course, it's a very generous amount that is there, and it's not just about the money, of course, because it opens up all sorts of new people to your work who perhaps have missed your work, or perhaps read one of your early books, didn't like it, and you hope they'll now come back to your work and check out where you've got to in your career now that I'm 10 books in. So I'm very pleased to be on this list, and I look forward to reading with the other poets.